来，拍下来，看好了。Wonderful.
It's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Yeah, we're still locked down, but we're still going to do Q&A with the coach today. We have a question from McLaren Emmons MMA who says, "Hey Ramsey, I'm planning on using YouTube as a means of getting used to being in front of a camera." Hey, that's exactly why I started a YouTube channel over 15 years ago. He goes on to say, getting used to being in front of a camera and marketing myself so I can market my fighting career more effectively. Any advice for a guy just starting out? Yes. Just start making content, start getting in front of a camera and talking. What you're doing is super important, man. It is imperative that fighters who plan on having a professional fighting career not only get good at fighting, but get good at talking. Why? Because nobody cares about a fight unless there's a story behind it, and if you can't speak for yourself, you won't be able to spin your own narrative, man. So you're doing yourself a great favor. Get in front of the camera as much as possible. Get comfortable being uncomfortable in front of the camera. Fighters often say that about training. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, like being in uncomfortable positions, getting tired, being fatigued, working through pain, struggling, that sort of thing. But you've got to bring that same mentality to communication. A lot of people struggle with this. Boy, I sure did. But as far as YouTube goes, just start making content right now. Don't second guess it. Don't think, well, it's got to be perfect. I've got to make all the edits. You're going to learn that along the way, man. Just start making content right now. Throw a bunch of stuff out there. Talk about whatever interests you. It doesn't have to be MMA related. Just start a channel right now, and you're going to start getting feedback from people. Some of it's going to be, "Oh, I love you," and a lot of it's going to be, "You suck. What the heck are you doing?" And that's part of the process. It's all going to help you in the end. Next question. Our next question comes from Naras Nan, who says, "How to stay strong and in shape after 40? You get out there and train." Next question. What else do we have today? Shor Shidoshi says, "If I came to train with you, assuming you would be open to it, would it be a worthwhile life experience? And if so, why?" If you trained with me, dude, it would be awesome. Are you kidding me? Of course. Next question. Wheel Parasite has 3 questions. Question number 1, have you ever tried sparring 2 or more people at once? Yes. Question number 2, if so, are there any unique strategies or concepts that you discovered to be effective? You have to be really good to make that work. If you're way better than 2 people, you can make it work. If you're way, way better than 3 people, you can make that work. Once you start adding 4 people or more, even if they suck, they're probably going to swarm you and you're going to get overwhelmed. Question number 3. Would you ever want to train with the express purpose of becoming better at fighting multiple attackers for a month or 3? Would I ever want to do that for 3 straight months? Well, that would detract from my main mission statement of training mixed martial artists to win MMA fights. But, you're asking so many questions about multiple opponents. We do drills like this at my gym sometimes. In fact, let's take a look at some videos. Xiao, you probably remember Xiao, my faithful assistant from a bunch of my technique videos. He's a smaller guy, and we had some bigger guys in the gym, and they decided to do multiple opponents sparring at Xiao's behest. Let's take a look, see how it went. Maybe do some commentary on these sparring sessions. See what it looks like when a smaller guy is attacked by multiple larger opponents. It would appear that Xiao is in a very compromised position, and he's kind of getting his butt kicked and unable to escape from these multiple larger opponents. They have just mercifully let him go and then proceeded the beatdown. One of them is taking a break and has now joined the action once again as the 2 larger, stronger, taller opponents take turns punching and kicking Xiao as he attempts to preserve himself the best he can. Our next question comes from Scuffed DXer, who says, from a self-defense aspect, for most average people, would Wing Chun or Krav Maga not be superior to Jiu-Jitsu or Judo? Just minimal basic moves and practice over and over the same basics rather than a million forms. Wasn't that Bruce Lee's goal? To take the best, simplest parts from various arts, minimalize the whole thing, and just practice the same moves. Was Bruce Lee any good at defending himself? I don't know, man. But it's a bit of a loaded question. Isn't style A better than style B? For self-defense, well, let's unload some of that. As I've said a million times on this channel, martial arts is not self-defense. Self-defense is a legal term. Self-defense is go get yourself a good lawyer to justify your violent action so you don't end up in prison. But if by self-defense you mean winning fights, which is what most people seem to mean when they say that, winning fights on the street. Street fights are not self-defense, guys. It's a different thing than self-preservation. But let's talk about winning fights for a minute. Is Wing Chun and Krav Maga better for winning fights than Jiu-Jitsu and BJJ? Labels don't win fights for you. You do or you don't. So the onus is on you, not on the name of the style. That being said, what percentage of Wing Chun and Krav Maga practitioners are good at winning fights? Now, what percentage of Judo and Jiu-Jitsu practitioners are good at winning fights? Compare and contrast. Now, you'll find exceptions, but we're looking at averages here. Okay? If you're looking to go with a style, a specific label, with the assumption that this is the specific brand that's going to grant me the greatest success in winning fights, then look at the guys who are actually winning the fights. Next question. Our next question comes from Eduardo Manero, who says, I asked this in your big guys video. I wanted your opinion on my situation. I'm a said big guy. I'm 6'6" and about 230 pounds. At my gym, our coach set up an event so that we could fight, and he was complaining that he couldn't get anyone in my weight class and skill level. His only options were people that already had a few fights. His words. I don't know what that meant exactly. I'm really considering asking for the more experienced opponent because I've been training for 3 years and would really like to know what a fight feels like. You don't really know me, but I'd still like your opinion on this situation. Would this be something you'd consider doing? If so, under which conditions would you do it? Some fighters have a tough time getting an opponent, and one of those is the really big guys. Another one is women. Often, those two categories of people get mismatched because, well, they get mismatched with the only other person in their weight class or their gender that showed up. And yeah, that can be tough sometimes. So is it worth it for your very first fight to go against somebody with significantly more experience? If that's the only experience you can get to get a fight in the first place. Sounds like this is an inter-club, amateur-style competition. So that being said, you're not going to be thrown to the wolves completely, most likely, against some professional fighter. But at the same time, never underestimate an amateur. They tend to fight like wild animals and try to murder you any way they can. So, if you want to know what a fight feels like, get into a fight. Say yes. If you don't want to know what a fight feels like, say no. But the better question is, do you want to know what a beating feels like? If the answer is no, then you best step up your game and get out there and train extra hard and extra smart and extra consistently, getting ready for this guy who is more experienced than you. Can you beat a guy who's more experienced than you? Heck yes, you can. Is it likely to happen your first fight? It's happened, especially at the amateur level. So, yeah, don't sell yourself short. If you trust your training, give it a try. If you don't, if in your heart of hearts you realize, I don't actually know how to fight, maybe get that taken care of first. But, you know, I got some faith in you, man. Get out there and train. Do what you feel's right. Let me know how it goes. Next question. Our next question comes from Swordsman, who says, thanks 1,000 for that G.I. Joe reference. Oh, I made a G.I. Joe reference in a previous video. Knowing is half the battle, and the other half is violence. Here's a question. Today there are a lot of martial artists building a mythos around themselves in order to gain popularity, like Frank Dukes, for example. To your knowledge, is this a recent thing, as far as how ridiculous these claims are, or is this phenomenon an age-old thing? It's ancient, man. It is absolutely ancient, the idea of martial artists creating a mythos around them to increase their fame. Man, there were some old Kungfu manuals that were written hundreds of years ago. I was reading some translations of them. And there was this alleged master teaching a technique called the red sand palm technique, which was essentially real-life Hadouken fireballs. And, man, people have had crazy mythos, magic powers ascribed to them for time immemorial. And if you look at other cultures, like European culture, you see so many stories of wizards and sorcery and all this stuff too. There's nothing new under the sun, man. There really isn't. But everybody famous has some mythos built up around them. They do, man, they do. Even the guys who don't try to do it. Take, for example, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee never tried to build up this crazy larger-than-life myth around him, except for in his acting. He tried to act the part of this character who was really good at fighting, who couldn't be beaten, and people loved it, right? But as far as the man goes, he wasn't telling people, I can beat anyone in a fight. He never said that. He was very humble when asked about his fighting abilities in real life. However, in spite of his best efforts to try to avoid becoming the superstar, man, he still had these magical abilities heaped upon him ex post facto after his death. And he's probably rolling over in his grave because of it. When you are famous, you're essentially ascribed magical powers whether you want them or not. So there's nothing new under the sun, man. Next question. Our next question comes from Carrie McKay, who says, you ever heard of a boxing gym trying to steal or poach fighters from other gyms? Happened to me. It was annoying. Yeah. Could end the question right there, but I guess I could tell you some stories. Sure, man, that happens all the time. It's happened to me. It's happened to friends of mine. When people see that you have a talent for coaching people, for doing all the legwork, for teaching people how to fight, then coaching them to be better fighters. Lazy people who don't want to do that legwork just want to steal the ready-made product, if you will. And it's annoying, but it's also a bit of a compliment, if you will, when people try to poach guys that I've trained. Man, it's like them admitting, I can't do this, I suck at this, but he knows what he's doing. So let's go try to glean some off the top here. It's life. Next question. Our next question comes from Paul Phoenix. He says he's been watching my videos for a while and thinks I can probably answer this question. I saw a video of a guy that says that Shin conditioning is a bro science myth. He links me to a video. Do you agree? I believe the truth is what Wonderboy Thompson and Quan Kicker say, and not some random grappler guy. What do you think? Thanks for your time. Random grappler guy. Okay, let's see what this link is. Oh, it is Armchair Violence. Armchair Violence. Shout out to Armchair Violence. I've enjoyed that channel recently. And this particular video I did see, and this isn't specific about, it's not specifically about shin conditioning, it's about bone conditioning, specifically making your bones more dense. Now, let's compare and contrast a little bit what Armchair Violence says and what Wonderboy Thompson, Quan Kicker say. In the videos by Wonderboy Thompson and Quan Kicker, they're talking specifically about conditioning your legs for the act of kicking. And if you look at what Stephen Thompson does, what's he doing? He's kicking. Now he does a few things like he rolls his legs, but most of his shin conditioning is kicking. So does that count as shin conditioning for kicking? Well, yeah. And let's see, Quan Kicker has some similar tutorials, kick stuff. What does that do? It makes your kicks better, it deadens the nerves on your shins to reduce pain, and it can make your legs tougher to some extent. What does Armchair Violence say? He says a whole bunch of things, but one of the most important points that he says is that the force of gravity and weight is going to have a much bigger impact on your bone density than swinging your shins at stuff. Is that true? Well, yeah. Yeah, it is. If you can squat really heavy and deadlift really heavy, and you do that consistently for many years, you're probably going to have more dense shins than a guy that just kicks a heavy bag. Now, does that mean you'll be as good at kicking as the guy who kicks the heavy bag a lot? No. No, because lifting weights is not kick conditioning. What is conditioning? It is preparing your body for specific activities. So they're both right. And yeah, it's not one of those mutually exclusive things. If you are preparing to kick, and kick effectively, and preparing for the contingency of getting your shins checked, well, should you be lifting weights and lifting heavy things? Yes, you absolutely should. Should you practice kicking a heavy bag many, many times over the course of long periods of time? Yes. Now, as far as rolling your shins, like Stephen Thompson did, I know that's some really old school karate style training. Man, I did that stuff as well. All that does is kills the nerves on your shins. That's it. There is a thin sheath of soft tissue between the bone of the shin and the skin on your leg. And rolling that, all that does is kill nerve endings. That's it. It doesn't actually make your legs tougher. I know a lot of people do that. A lot of people swear by it. Wonderboy does that. And it's not bad or wrong. I mean, it's better to be able to shrug off pain in a fight than if you if you get a kick check, just grab your shin and go like, oh, it hurts. I can't continue. Oh, the pain's too much. You know, none of these are invalid ideas for training. But at the same time, not all training methodologies are of equal value. And just because a famous, successful person does something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do it too. And just because some guy on the internet that you've never heard of says something, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. So once again, shout out to Armchair Violence. I enjoy his channel. Go check him out. Next question. Our next question comes from Simon, who says, hey, Ramsey, you do a lot of what-if questions about UFC 1. It's because you guys ask me so many what-if questions about UFC 1. That's why. I answer your questions, man. If you ask me about, is the earth flat, I'd probably answer that question too. But let me ask one more. If a super high-level judoka or a practitioner of Japanese shoot wrestling was allowed to participate in UFC 1, and managed to do what Masahiko Kimura and Kazushi Sakuraba did and defeated Gracie, how would it change the history of MMA in America and worldwide? What would happen if submission grappling was still proven to be the most effective, but not necessarily of the Gracie variety? Okay, so if we had a different style of submission grappling compete in UFC 1 and defeat Royce Gracie. For example, if Ken Shamrock, with his catch wrestling background, had defeated Royce Gracie, maybe caught him in a heel hook or something like that. How would that look? If Ken or someone else, maybe a judo practitioner, a catch-as-catch-can practitioner, a shoot fighter, etc., had won that tournament via submission, what would have happened? Would everybody be practicing catch wrestling or judo or some Japanese jiu-jitsu style or whatever? We could even expand this question to what if Art Jimerson, the one-glove boxer, had somehow managed to win UFC 1? What if he got lucky 3 times in a row and knocked everybody out with a single punch? Would everybody say boxing is the superior martial art? That's all we need to do forever and ever, amen. Well, I'm going to answer all of these questions. Here's what would have happened. The Gracies would have buried the footage, and sometime later, they probably would have started over again, hosted a different tournament, maybe had a different one of Helio Gracie's sons compete instead of Royce this time. And then they would have taken their infomercial someplace else, man. You mentioned Kimura. If you don't know the story of Masahiko Kimura, he fought Helio Gracie in a Vale Tudo match and submitted him with an arm lock, which today is popularly known in jiu-jitsu as the Kimura, named after the man who did it to Helio Gracie. Now, it has its own name in judo, and all the judo nerds will angrily type in the comment, it's not the Kimura, it's got this polysyllabic Japanese name that nobody knows except me, and I feel special saying it. And all the catch wrestlers will be like, actually, it's not the Kimura, it's called the Hammerlock, say it right, son. So, but yeah, man, if somebody besides Royce had won the UFC 1 tournament, that's what would have happened. We wouldn't have heard about UFC 1 for the most part. And you might be thinking, well, wasn't it sold as a live pay-per-view? Well, yes, it was. But how many of you bought that pay-per-view? Not too many. I think it was a couple thousand people worldwide actually bought the pay-per-view. The rest of us, when we saw UFC 1, how did we see it? Well, the ones of us who saw it back in the 90s, we knew a guy who had a VHS copy that he got from a guy. And later on, when it came to home video, and they rented it out in like Blockbuster, Hollywood video stores, you had to go to the secret special interest section in the back that had all the weird videos that nobody wanted to see. Yeah, man. They would have buried it. Nobody would have heard of it. Did you know there were other MMA events in America before UFC 1? There were other no rules, no holds barred fighting tournaments with fighters of different martial arts backgrounds, different styles, style against style, similar to the UFC, but nobody ever heard of them. Why? Poor marketing, that's why. The UFC, I mean, it had some pretty decent marketing for a fringy little infomercial-style tournament, but most people never heard of it until a big corporation bought it. Yeah, man. In fact, most people never heard of it until The Ultimate Fighter 1 came out. It's just nerds like me who borrowed old VHS tapes from a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who were watching UFC back in the day, man. So once again, everybody likes to think, they like to entertain this idea that if a catch wrestler had gone in there or a shoot fighter had gone in there, everybody would be training and, that catch wrestling would have the same fame and notoriety as BJJ right now. No, they wouldn't. Why? Why? Because they weren't the ones putting on the show. There's a lot to be said about being first. Not in the YouTube comment section if you just write first. Write a real comment, guys. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what's on your mind. And if the only thing on your mind is first, I mean, it helps the algorithm, I guess, but I want to know what's on your mind. So if you have questions, leave them in the comments down below. I do read your comments. That's where I get the questions for this show, Q&A with the Coach, from the comment section of YouTube. But that's beside the point. Yeah, man, we would not be all practicing shoot fighting. You wouldn't have heard of UFC 1. Next question. Our next question comes from La Caja de Juguete y Algo Más, who says, Hello there, sir. I'm a huge fan, being a martial artist since I was 13. I'm 47. I'm an old man. You're an old man. Dude, you're a couple of years older than me. Does that mean I'm going to be an old man in a couple of years here? Ooh, my kids already think I'm an old man, but let's go on. But I really admire and respect you. I try to keep up to date on all your videos. They are very insightful. But I just wanted to comment on some of the things I just noticed. Oh, he's commenting on a short video clip I posted on my YouTube story. Let me show that clip right here in its entirety. So this was part of an online fitness challenge that some friends of mine over at the Animal MMA gym here in Shanghai have going. If you don't know, Shanghai is currently locked down. And one thing we're doing to keep each other motivated is every day somebody from this chat group will post a different 1-minute long exercise challenge, and then we all do it and post our videos, just to keep us getting out there and training, even if it's just something simple, right? To keep each other motivated. And on this particular day, the challenge was to balance and do some Bill Wallace-style kicking exercises. Essentially, extend the leg into a side kick without putting it down, hook kick without putting it down, round kick, and repeat. So here I am, side kick, hook kick, round kick, side kick, etc. Without putting my foot down, do a couple on the right, do a couple on the left. So let's see what La Caja de Juguete y Algo Más says. I see myself as a Kung Fu guy, make of that what you will, but the way you are chambering side kicks from the knee, that's how I kick, but I rarely see that. That's how I was taught in Kung Fu, not to bring up the knee and chamber from there, but more like from the ground, bring up the foot to the knee, and from there, the knee extends or wipes out. We call it a tiger tail. I'm not really following this description here because I'm kicking from a already chambered knee there, lifting it up off the ground, then throwing the side kick, hook kick, etc. I don't know, maybe we're seeing something different. Anyway, I've always felt that the advantage of kicking from the knee is faster than chambering to the waist, bringing your knee up all the way like Taekwondo does it. I'm just wondering what you think about the difference and if there is a specific way that you feel it's more effective in combat. And trust me, I know that side kicks get a bad rap, do they? Do they? Is it all those nerds on the internet saying side kicks don't work as a joke? I don't get that. I don't understand why that joke started, why it's supposed to be funny, what it's referring to. Somebody explain that meme to me. Anyway. Then again, so does Kung Fu. God bless and keep up the good work and stay safe. I'm always curious what martial art people who say they practice Kung Fu actually practice. There are over 400 different styles of Chinese martial arts. Did you know that? Saying Kung Fu, it's a mispronunciation of the old Wade Giles spelling of Gong Fu, which means great skill in Chinese. It does not refer to a specific martial art or fighting style. Again, there are over 400 different Chinese traditional martial arts, which you could classify as Chinese Kung Fu, if you will, if you want to refer to them as martial arts. So, what style is it, man? What style? No idea. But there are dozens of different ways to throw a sidekick, man. Now, I think I know what you're talking about, instead of lifting your knee as high as you want to kick and then extending from there, sort of flicking the sidekick up from the leg. That's a valid way to throw a sidekick, and so is the previous one. There are many valid ways to throw a sidekick. If your sidekicks come from a popular Chinese tradition, particularly one that competes in Sanda, that might explain a little bit of the similarity, because I've trained in Sanda, I've competed in Sanda, I have fought many Sanda fighters, and I use sidekicks very similar to how many Sanda fighters use their sidekicks. I like using it as a lead. I like using it leading into combinations. I like using it to bridge the gap. I like using it to push a guy away. I use the sidekick for a lot of reasons. I love using it to set up takedowns. I like kicking the head with the sidekick. These are all things you see in Sanda. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of Chinese influence in the way that I throw sidekicks, in spite of the fact that I initially learned sidekicks from Korean and Japanese martial arts, Taekwondo, Shotokan, Kyokushin. But yeah, man, sidekicks, there are a lot of ways to do it. So if you're seeing similarities in other people's sidekicks, well, that's why. Next question. Caleb Warden says, "Hey Ramsey, I see MMA, and what I don't like about it is that it seems devoid of all the cool stuff." Devoid? The void or devoid? Anyway, devoid of all the cool stuff in martial arts. So I was wondering, could you use like Tiger Claw or Eagle Talon, or is there a way you could use that in MMA? This is kind of curious. I don't do MMA. I'm just curious about that. In other words, animal styles. Okay, Caleb, I think I understand what you're saying. A lot of people who are used to seeing traditional martial arts forms or watching Kung Fu movies, because it looks really cool. You see like wushu forms. They do all this spinning stuff and all these fancy movements. And then you watch a real fight and it's nothing like that. And you see people doing some fairly rudimentary striking and grappling, and it doesn't look all cool like in the movies. It doesn't look all cool like in Kung Fu forms, right? Why is that? Because reality is very different than the practice of forms. Forms are essentially it's a living encyclopedia of movements that you can draw from. It's not a how to actually look when you're really fighting sort of thing, right? But you asked about tiger claws. Now, in the tiger claw martial art, there are a bunch of different techniques, but I assume you mean raking the flesh with your fingers. Raking the flesh is a prohibited technique in the sport of mixed martial arts under unified rules. Clawing, raking, scratching with your fingernails, you can't do that. That's a foul. Eagle claw, I'm not really familiar with the techniques of eagle claw kung fu. I've never met a real practitioner of it. That's something I've only seen in the movies, so all of my information about eagle claw kung fu comes from an old Jackie Chan movie. So, why doesn't the UFC look like a Jackie Chan movie? Because that was a movie. And, yeah, the UFC is live, unarmed combat. Next question. Our next question comes from, oh man, this is a polysyllabic for a name of an origin I do not recognize. I apologize if I'm about to butcher it. I'll try to say your first name at least. Kapil Thev. I'm going to call you K. Anyway, our friend K says, is Ramsey a natural middleweight? To which I responded to him in text, I fought in 4 different weight classes. There's nothing natural about weight classes. That's absolutely true. Restricting fighters to a specific weight class and then what they do to cut down to those weight classes is anything but natural. But our friend K responds, but is there such a thing as an ideal weight class for a person depending on their preferred physical state? Yeah. So I fought in 4 different weight classes. Middleweight, welterweight, lightweight, and featherweight. Okay? And that's including MMA fights, kickboxing matches, Muay Thai fights, Sanda fights, etc. Fought in 4 different weight classes throughout a career that spanned about 10 years in combat sports. And right now I weigh about 215 pounds, 97, 98 kilos, something like that. And is that a natural middleweight? I could cut down to 185 from here. I don't want to because cutting weight is dumb and I'm not going to do it anymore. Now that I've retired from professional fighting, there's no reason for me to do that anymore. But I could easily make 185. It's kind of odd having to cut down to middleweight now because when I was competing, when I fought at middleweight, I had to go up to get there. When I fought at middleweight for the first time, I weighed like 160 pounds. Middleweight is 185 pounds, if you don't know. But I weighed about 100. I weighed 160, maybe a tiny bit more. And I ended up getting a fight with a dude who was cutting down from like 200 plus pounds to make 185. And this was the only fight I could get. I really needed the money. The reason I started professional fighting was for an extra paycheck. And so I weighed in fully clothed, wearing a coat filled with weighted objects, water bottles, rolls of pennies, just anything I could get my hands on. I gorged myself with water. I drank like a gallon of water before the weigh-ins to get as heavy as I could to meet the minimum specified weight of 171 pounds. So I had like 11 extra pounds of weight on me while I weighed in. My opponent stripped down to his skivvies and stepped on the weight and just looked like an absolute beast next to me who looked like a tiny little person compared to him. Anyway, that fight did not go well. But now I would actually have to cut down to get to middleweight, because I put on a lot of mass since retiring from professional fighting. Because here's the thing, man. If you're not a professional fighter, there is absolutely zero advantage to being the little guy in the gym. So if you're not training specifically for combat sports to compete in a specific weight class, there is no reason to be the little guy. But your question, is there such a thing as preferred weight classes? Yeah. So if you are cutting down to a specific weight class, here's how you're going to choose it. The one at which you can perform the best. Professional fighting is not necessarily a measurement of who has the best technique, who's the best athlete, etc. It's all of that plus who performs best after cutting weight. And that's a big deal. Because if you're an awesome fighter and an awesome athlete and you cut too much weight, it's going to drain you, it's going to sap your energy, you're going to be slow, you're going to be unresponsive, you're going to cramp up, and you will grossly underperform. So you want to cut as little weight as possible while still being the biggest you possibly can within your weight division. It's a balancing act, man. Good luck with that. I think they should do away with weight cutting entirely and do day of weigh-ins. Man, I need to do a video just on that. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll do that right after recording this Q&A with the coach session. Weight cuts need to end, friends. Next question. Our next question comes from our friend Austin Hamby, who says, isn't China sensitive with your religion? I'm concerned for your safety. Man, it's interesting how many of you guys are concerned for my safety because I live in China, and religion isn't the reason you probably should be concerned about safety right now. It's this It is this endless Shanghai lockdown, man. But I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about some friends of mine. I'm worried about a lot of people out there in this city. It's a rough time right now. I made several videos about the Shanghai lockdown. But anyway, religion. If you're not familiar, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you don't know what that is, sometimes it is pejoratively called the Mormons. So, is China sensitive with my religion? Here's the deal with China and religion. China offers what they call freedom of religion. By that they mean freedom to practice whatever you want as long as you do it within certain confines. You can believe whatever you want, but you can't do whatever you want. So, for example, if you're a Christian, you can believe in Jesus all you want. You can read the Bible by yourself all you want. But what you're not free to do is have a religious meeting, like a church meeting, without express permission from the government. So there are certain people who have tried to have church meetings without express permission from the government, and that gets shut down. So, yeah. Am I concerned for my safety? No, because I don't go about violating the law here in China in that regard as far as my religion goes. So, no. Until China does what the United States did back in the 1800s and issues another Mormon extermination order like the U.S. government did, I'm not concerned about my safety because of my religion. Did you know about the Mormon extermination order? Oh, man. That was a whole thing back in the day. And they didn't repeal that law until the 1980s. Just sort of quietly got swept under the rug. Anyway, that was a thing, though. That was a thing. Next question. Our next question comes from Arthur Peralta, who says, does my religion ever create any speed bumps living in China? Man, a lot of religious questions today. Does my religion ever create any speed bumps living in China? No, not really. The biggest thing that draws attention to itself about my religion is the fact that I don't drink tea. So my church has this thing called the Word of Wisdom, which means that members of the church proscribe. They are proscribed from using alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, and illicit harmful drugs. And a lot of people are confused about tea and coffee, especially here in China, where people drink tea all the time. Tea is normal. Drinking tea is as normal as drinking water in China. And when I'm offered tea, which is often, and I refuse the tea, it doesn't make sense to Chinese people. They're like, wow, what? No tea? Americans don't like tea? No, it's not that. It's my religion. What kind of crazy religion doesn't drink tea? And it blows their minds. And they want to know more about it, but here's the catch. Because of religious laws in China, I can't tell them more about it. And so we're in this weird situation where they're asking me all these questions about my religion that I can't legally answer. All I can tell them is, sorry, I don't drink tea because of my religion, and then they want to know more, but they can't know more because of the law. So is that a speed bump? I guess. Next question. Our last question today comes from Brian, who says, hi, Ramsey, how would you recommend staying clear-minded in the face of confrontation? Thanks. You won't. You can't. You don't. In the face of confrontation, you are going to stress out. Your heart rate is going to increase. Your adrenaline will spike. You will not think, you will act or you will react. And how you will act or react will depend entirely on your previous experiences. So if you have experienced high-stress situations similar to this many times before, think about how you operated under those circumstances. That's how you're going to operate under these ones. There's this thing I always say, get out there and train. Why? Your training should simulate the circumstances that you intend to face. For example, if you want to be a professional MMA fighter, you should do some MMA sparring. Why? Because that puts you in a similar situation that you're going to be in a fight. Somebody punching and kicking and grappling you. Somebody trying to outstrike you, outgrapple you, and outmaneuver you in a cage. And if you don't have that experience, you won't be a good MMA fighter. And if you're worried about facing a stressful situation with a clear head, well, you've got to face stressful situations over and over again because your head won't be clear, you won't think, you will act, or you will react. You will resort to your most base level of training. So make sure your base level of training is good and consistent. Thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.